there was Texas football player availability on Friday. And Sports Information Director John Bianco brought everybody out. And right at the very end of the availability, he said, beep, 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 beep. Oh, hot message here from head coach Steve Sarkisian. Quinn Ewers is going to be the starting quarterback for the Texas Longhorns. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Interesting way to announce it. I would have loved to have heard this from Steve Sarkisian so that we could have had some follow-up questions. How did the competition go? You know, reports were that Hudson Card had done a good job of pushing Ewers for the job. There's a lot to break down here. Quinn Ewers, obviously one of the biggest stars in the entire sport. What do you make of Quinn Ewers finally announced as Texas's QB1?
What do I make of it, or what do I want to wildly speculate about?
Well, those are two things that are probably hand in hand.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I feel like since Quinn Ewers transferred to Texas, I feel like we always thought this was the logical destination point where he was going there. He was going to be the starter. We talked about it as if he was the starter pretty much the entire offseason. And then it really wasn't until the last week or so when the reports started leaking out that's like, hey, Hudson Card's not exactly out of this. Like it's, you know, there was some hesitation there, but I don't know. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise. He was the top-ranked quarterback in his recruiting class. He's a high-rated 5-star. He's apparently a very talented player. So the fact that he's winning the starting job, not a huge surprise. But I will say that the way it was announced and just like the phrase, like when the tweets that came out announcing it, just it was odd because like
the reporter said it was awkward. You could hear a pin drop. There was no like celebration. There was no fanfare to it. Like that was a very odd way to announce it.
So like, since Sark didn't make the announcement and the SID did, and I think it was Brian Davis from the Austin American-Statesman who originally tweeted and said they were sitting down to do interviews with players when the SID stepped in and announced that Ewers would be the starter. And he said, like, none of the players they were interviewing had any response to it. So either A, they already knew, or B, they weren't excited. I think Occam's razor here, they already knew, right? But I think B is a lot more fun.
That they weren't excited
because if you go to the message boards, like there's a whole lot of speculation and just gossip going about, and most of it coming from Texas A&M boards because Texas A&M doesn't care about Texas. They aren't rivals. Stop asking them about it. They think that Sark didn't make the decision. It's clearly a booster who made the decision and forced it upon them, which is why Sark didn't announce it. And his teammates all hate him, and there's going to be a revolt in the locker room. Which, it's Texas. It might all be true.
Right. I was going to say the idea that there's too many cooks in the kitchen, the idea that there's a lot of boosters and there's a lot of influence, like this all checks out. That's the problem with our wild speculation, is that based on everything we know about that football program and how it operates, all of it might be the case. I do think that this could be a Quinn Ewers thing, that Quinn Ewers probably, as soon as he showed up on campus, was going to be the QB1. And that maybe in some of these scrimmages and in some of this work, the player who I think has more arm talent than anybody else in that quarterback room, Hudson Card included, and is probably the highest ceiling player of anybody in that quarterback room, maybe he wasn't processing everything, and maybe he was turning the ball over a few too many times. And that if you're head coach Steve Sarkisian, or if you're the offensive staff and you're seeing your QB1, who is likely going to be QB1, starting to be a little bit loose with the ball, maybe that is what leads to some of that conversation, or maybe that was what allowed Hudson Card to be reportedly very much in this, even to the point where Friday morning there were reports that were like Hudson Card might be the front runner here. So now Steve Sarkisian has to jump ahead of that. Here's what I think about the timing. I don't think that the boosters forced him to do it, though I joked with you on text that Steve Sarkisian got hit with the announce it tomorrow or else. Like, I don't think that's the case. No. I think that he wanted Quinn Ewers to be able to go into the second scrimmage and be able to be the starting quarterback, to run with the ones and to see how he handles that situation, leading the offense, like doing all those things that are intangibles. If you believe as a head coach that you can tighten up on some of those mistakes, you can get Quinn Ewers into a point where he is not going to cost your team. Now you need him to do all those things that you want to see out of a starting quarterback, and letting him know heading into that scrimmage, I think, was a big part of it. So The timing certainly was odd, but I think it probably has the most to do with what Quinn Ewers was showing that wasn't great in terms of some of the turnovers that he had so far in camp, and then what they were expecting out of their starting quarterback, what they wanted to see from him going into the weekend.
Yeah, and I also think there's a possibility, which this is far less boring, but going back to the Occam's razor of the players weren't excited because the players already knew. Like the fact, like what was happening last week? There were quarterbacks who were losing their position battle who were entering the transfer portal. It could also just be that the Hudson Card is still fighting for the job and still has a chance to win it. Could have been floated out just to make sure he's not entering the transfer portal because they want to keep him as depth because maybe, it's like, hey, Ewers, they might think he's really good. They don't think he's perfect. Or they're trying to be like, if he gets hurt, it would be great to still have Hudson Card behind him. So there's any number of reasons for what the hell happened with all this, but we know how the internet's going to react to anything.
Well, and by the way, we've already got one major injury on the offensive line for Texas, the group that is potentially very talented. We expect Texas's offensive line to be good in the future. Right now, a little bit green,
a little
bit thin, a little bit shaky. Like if Quinn Ewers does end up, I mean, I don't know. Is there anybody on Texas's schedule that has a strong and violent pass rusher and a defense that might create some physically challenging opportunities for a quarterback who's on the run and running for his life out there?
I don't know. I haven't looked at UTSA's depth chart lately. Maybe. I don't know.